nationalist elite? In New York, that same year of the Boston house attack, someone wrote to the New York Gazette, quote, "Is it equitable that 999 should suffer for the extravagance or grandeur of one? Especially when it's considered that men frequently owe their wealth to the impoverishment of their neighbors?" End quote. The leaders of the revolution would worry about keeping such sentiments within limits. Mechanics were demanding political democracy in the colonial cities. Open meetings of representative assemblies, public galleries in the legislative halls, and the publishing of roll call votes so that constituents could check on representatives. They wanted open-air meetings where the population could participate in making policy, more equitable taxes, price controls, and the election of mechanics and other ordinary people to government posts. Isn't it funny that, 250 years ago, the people were complaining about the same things and wanting the same things that we want now? They were wanting, open meetings of the representative assemblies. You mean kind of like C-SPAN? Public galleries in the legislative halls, like open halls. Publishing roll call votes. Yeah, we get that at the end of all the votes too. And we know exactly who's causing the problems and not listening to the people. And somehow, amazingly, they keep getting voted in. Isn't that the darndest thing? It's almost like reforming systems doesn't necessarily always work, even when you get what you wanted. Craziness. Especially in Philadelphia, according to Nash, the consciousness of the lower middle classes grew to the point where it must have caused some hard thinking, not just among the conservative loyalists sympathetic to England, but even among leaders of the revolution. Quote, by mid-1776, laborers, artisans, and small tradesmen employing extra-legal measures when electoral politics failed were in clear command in Philadelphia, end quote. Helped by some middle-class leaders, like Thomas Paine, Thomas Young, and others, they, quote, launched a full-scale attack on wealth and even on the right to acquire unlimited private property, end quote. Now, if you're not familiar with Thomas Paine did do the, was it the Federation Papers, if I remember correctly? Gosh, I'm trying to remember stuff from my political science classes on this one. And he was actually a big freedom writer, big advocate of the freedom thing. He was one of the influencers of the Constitution, of the Declaration of Independence. He did a lot of writing at the time. I don't know if he was actually a founding father, but I'm sure we're going to get there. In the countryside, where most people lived, there was a similar conflict of poor against rich, one which political leaders would use to mobilize the population against England, granting some benefits for the rebellious poor and many more for themselves in the process. The tenant riots in New Jersey in the 1740s, the New York tenant uprisings of the 1750s and 1760s in the Hudson Valley, and the rebellion in northeastern New York that led to the carving of Vermont out of New York State were all more than sporadic rioting. They were long-lasting social movements, highly organized, involving the creation of counter-governments. They were aimed at a handful of rich landlords, but with the landlords far away, they often had to direct their anger against farmers who had leased the disputed land from the owners. See Edward Countryman's pioneering work on the Rural Rebellion. Just as the Jersey rebels had broken into jails to free their friends, rioters in the Hudson Valley rescued prisoners from the sheriff and one time took the sheriff himself as prisoner. The tenants were seen as, quote, chiefly the dregs of the people, end quote, and the posse that the sheriff of Albany County led to Bennington in 1771 included the privileged top of the local power structure. The land rioters saw their battle as poor against rich. A witness at a rebel leader's trial in New York in 1766 said that the farmers evicted by the landlords, quote, had an equitable title but could not be defended in a course of law because they were poor, and poor men were always oppressed by the rich, end quote. Ethan Alien's Green Mountain rebels in Vermont described themselves as, quote, a poor people, fatigued in settling a wilderness country, end quote, and their opponents as, quote, a number of attorneys and other gentlemen with all their tackle of ornaments and compliments and French finesse, end quote. Land-hungry farmers in the Hudson Valley turned to the British for support against the American landlords. The Green Mountain rebels did the same. But as the conflict with Britain intensified, the colonial leaders of the movement for independence, aware of the tendency for poor tenants to side with the British in their anger against the rich, adopted policies to win over people in the countryside. In North Carolina, a powerful movement of white farmers was organized against wealthy and corrupt officials in the period from 1766 to 1771, exactly those years when, in the cities of the Northeast, agitation was growing against the British, crowding out class issues. The movement in North Carolina was called the Regulator Movement, and it consisted, says Marvin L. Michael Kay, a specialist in the history of that movement, of, quote, class-conscious white farmers in the West who attempted to democratize local government in their respective counties, end quote. The regulators referred to themselves as, quote, poor industrious peasants, as laborers, the wretched poor, oppressed by rich and powerful designing monsters, end quote. The regulators saw that a combination of wealth and political power ruled North Carolina and denounced those officials, quote, whose highest study is the promotion of their wealth, end quote. They resented the tax system, which was especially burdensome on the poor, and the combination of merchants and lawyers who worked in the courts to collect debts from the harassed farmers. In the western counties where the movement developed, only a small percentage of the households had slaves, and 41% of these were concentrated, to take one sample Western County, in less than 2% of the households. The regulators did not represent servants or slaves, but they did speak for small owners, squatters, and tenants. A contemporary account of the regulator movement in Orange County describes the situation. Quote, thus were the people of Orange insulted by the sheriff